Hello, Internet. Mike Bertolini here, playing another edition of Cthulhu Chronicles. I'm going to be playing Edge of Darkness. I'm going to be reading it as well, since this is normally a game you don't read or narrate yourself. So, hope you enjoy. I'm wondering how I'm going to make it. Let's see. I played as Nathaniel Burke last time. I didn't do very good. I'm gonna try Dr. Loretta Golly. Antiquarian. Yeah. Notorious among the academic community for her sense of humor, Dr. Golly is a renowned expert in artifacts of Ptolemaic Egypt. She constantly travels between museums and universities, both domestically and abroad, in her pursuit of new obscurities and knowledge. Her most recent excursions to Canada was a huge disappointment, and now she plans to take a brief sabbatical in Arkham in the hopes that a break from the field will restore her passion for it. She has a weapon. Not a lot of health, a lot of sanity, which is always good. Um, yeah, okay, let's do this. Hopefully, I will not die. Your arrival in Arkham does not go as planned. You expected a rough start after that disaster of a trip, but lost luggage and a delayed arrival has been the least of your worries since you arrived. Unfortunately, Arkham's lone university cares more about your recent failed expedition than you thought they would. Miskatonic University is small and a slightly above average caliber overall, but the Antiquities Department is above and beyond the university standard. They are Ivy League schools with lesser collections. You had hoped this would make them more willing to take you on, but it seems to have had the opposite effect. The university has been polite, of course, cordial even, but they have nevertheless cleverly and completely erased any hope you had of finding work at their institution. However, making so many trips to Miskatonic has afforded you the opportunity to overhear a few choice tidbits of gossip. It's gauche of you to eavesdrop, but you're desperate for any foothold you can get in the university's affairs, and you think you may have found just the one. Your lead is the retired professor, Rupert Merriweather, who was recently admitted to Miskatonic General for a heart condition. He's not expected to last much longer. You've overheard several professors murmuring about how sad it is that he should be losing his mind as well as his health. Rupert Merriweather has apparently been talking about monsters and debts to be paid. You have the feeling that you might be able to be of service in this particular area. The hospital is just as sterile and clinical as one would expect, and just as bureaucratic, too. You're forced to waste precious time in the waiting room as several other people check in ahead of you, occupying the attention of the front desk sole attendant. Your annoyance is tempered by your sympathy for the poor attendant. She's the only person behind the desk, with no backup against the seething masses. Her polite mask is starting to crack as she seems under the pressure. Finally, after half an hour of standing in line, you're up at bat. The attending nurse looks at you expectantly, braced for another shouted reprimand for the slow service. She visibly relaxes when you calmly and politely ask to see Rupert Merriweather. You have to sign a few short forms, and then you're given a visitor's badge and sent upstairs. Rupert Merriweather is in room 203, halfway down the hall on the second floor. It's quiet as you approach. You knock twice and enter. For all that you study dead people, seeing the living makes this transition has never been particularly easy, especially when terminal illness is involved. There's a slowness to it, a clumsiness and vulnerability that makes it difficult to watch. You can see from a glance that the retired Professor Merriweather is stumbling towards his last breath. His face is pale as the bed sheets, and his chest rises and falls in uneasy stutters. The woman at his bedside doesn't react to your entrance, but the younger man standing against the wall does. "Who are you?" he snaps. "Fellow academic," you say. "Dr. Loretta Golly." I came to pay my respects to an esteemed peer and ask if there's anything I can do to help. The man's lips twist into a sneer. Rather than direct his apparent fear at you, he rounds to Meriwether. So you've even got the university involved now, he says, voice rising in volume with each word. I promise, I'm not here to waste your time, you say quickly. I just want to help. The man barks out a laugh. Of course, none of them wanted to waste our time, did they? But they did. They listened and laughed and laughed. Now everyone's talking about the crazy old professor. Poor man, losing his sanity along with his health. The woman at Mr. Merrill's bedside burst into tears. Bertrand, enough. Bertrand, enough, Mr. Merriweather says in a louder voice than you'd expect from a man on his deathbed. Bertrand falls silent. The woman's bedside begins fretting over him, smoothing the already smooth sheets across his chest. Hush, dear, she says. Her voice trembles with the effort of holding back further tears. You're in no condition to be yelling. Mr. Merriweather heaves another sigh and looks over to you. Please excuse my family. They're taking this all very hard. Bertrand's responding scoff is ignored. Come, sit. You take the seat opposite Mrs. Merriweather. Bertrand makes a displeased sound, which goes unacknowledged. Mr. Merriweather darts a warning look at his son even as he begins speaking to you. There's no use beating around the bush. I'm dying, and I have a rather serious matter I need taken care of before I go. He looks at you with a truly grave expression. It concerns the supernatural. When I was younger, Meriwether begins, during the summer before I started classes at Miskatonic University, my boyhood friends and I formed a special club. We were all interested in history and psychology and the occult, and I'm afraid we got a bit swept up in it. He smiles, bittersweet. His eyes slide away from yours and into the past. One of our group, Marion Allen, volunteered his family's summer house in the country as a place to meet and experiment with our research. We were so excited. Meriwether takes a deep, rattling breath. His wife squeezes his hand and kisses the back of his knuckles. We didn't think it would work. Not really. We were young and stupid in the way that only young people can be. We felt immortal, drawing pentagrams and playing at being dark sorcerers, until one day it worked and brought forth something truly evil. He looks up at you with wet eyes. It killed two of my best friends where they stood. Marion and I got out alive, but he passed away last week. They found his body in Louisiana. Everything he had was left to me, including the deed to that house. He takes a deep, rattling breath. Your own lungs ache in sympathy. I'm the last survivor, Meriwether says, and once I'll die, it'll leave that house and kill everything in its path. I just know it. You need to kill it. Please. Meriwether sighs. A fair question. The truth is, I'm not sure. I can make any one of a number of excuses for myself, and some of them might approach the truth, but really, there's no good reason. Just fear and cowardice. He smiles again. It's a sad, broken thing. And now here I am, an old, sick man on his deathbed asking a stranger to fix his mistakes. Meriwether turns to his wife, and they share a long, quiet look. Finally, she sighs and reaches out into her purse. She withdraws a small, folded piece of paper. It looks to have been torn from a notebook. I still don't approve of any of this, she says in a long, suffering tone. Her voice is as watery as her eyes. But if it will help. She presses the paper into your hands. Meriwether smiles at her and looks back at you. He opens his mouth to speak. No sound comes out. Instead, his eyes go wide and a terrible hacking sound bubbles up from his throat. His whole body jerks up off the bed as he coughs, and blood dribbles from his open mouth. He coughs again, and again, and the blood keeps coming. Bertrand is already shouting for doctors and nurses. Merriweather's wife is frozen in place, mouth open in a soundless scream. The doctors and nurses arrive, pouring into the room and crowding around the bed. You are forced away from Merriweather's bed as he spasms with the force of his coughing. You find yourself alone in the hallway, unable to see Merriweather past the throng of attendants. You shouldn't stay here. You can't. You start walking. You get all the way outside of the hospital before remembering the paper in your hands. You open it with slow, careful movements to compensate for the trembling of your fingers. It's a map of a place called Ross's Corners. It's hand-drawn, and the lines are shaky and uneven. Merriweather must have drawn it after his health started failing. Nevertheless, one specific place on the map is circled very precisely. That's where you're going. Your head sends all the way to the bus stop. Arcane rituals? Summoning a dark entity? Death? You've heard a lot of fantastic stories over the years, working in your profession, but you always chalked them up to nerves and excitable dispositions. The stories never came from anyone you really trusted or respected as an academic, so it's easy to dismiss them. Now, you think you may have made a mistake. You arrive at the ticket office, still in a haze. The ticket saleswoman, to her credit, compensates for your absent-mindedness by diligently repeating her questions until you give a satisfactory answer. She also offers you a map of that bus route, which includes a fairly detailed map of Arkham and its environs. You realize just how helpful this will be a few minutes later, as you sit on a bench and finally collect your thoughts enough to realize that you'll need an actual map to compare Merriweather's hand-drawn one to. By the time the bus arrives, you feel much steadier and sure of your trajectory. You board along with a few others and take a seat near the front. Ross's Corners is one of the first few stops on the trip, so it's a short ride. Thanks to your passengers, it's also very noisy. Usually you prefer peace and quiet while on public transportation, but today you're grateful for the distraction. It keeps you from getting too tangled up in morbid thoughts. You're the only person to disembark at Ross's Corners, and no one is waiting to board either. Once the bus drives off, the bus stop and its surroundings are completely silent. You can see the town square from here, and it is similarly vacant. The sun hasn't even fully set yet, so the town is either half deserted or all of its residents like to turn in very, very early. Neither option has great implications. If you're reading Merriweather's map right, and assuming it's even vaguely accurate, the marked area is through the woods to the northwest of Ross's Corners. The sun is still in the early stage of its descent, which would be if it didn't perfectly begin to shine in your eyes as you walked forward. You narrowly avoid tripping over the undergrowth several times and stumble into a few trees in the process. Finally, you make it out of the woods and emerge into hilly farmland. This area, too, is vacant, but at least that's to be expected. You check your map again, and your heart sinks as you realize that this isn't the right spot. Merriweather's map makes clear note of the river near the marked area, and there's no water in sight. But you can't even hear the faintest rush of water. What you do hear is an angry yell off to your left. You turn quickly, tensed and ready for an attack. There isn't one. There's just a farmer standing on the porch of his house. She holds a rifle in one hand, but it's pointed to the ground, and her fingers aren't even close to the trigger. "Hey!" she shouts, and this time your head is clear enough to make out her words. It helps that she started walking towards you. Her long strides quickly bridge the gap between you. "What are you doing out so late?" You hold the map out for the farmer to see. Her eyes fly wide open. "Who gave you that map?" she asks, and immediately shakes her head. "No, never mind. I don't want to know. Whoever it was, they're no friend of yours. Best you turn around now and head back to town. Maybe someone there will take you in before it gets too dark. The farmer's frown deepens. Well then, good luck, I guess. You'll need it. She hesitates a moment, then sticks out one leathery hand to shake yours. Name's McFurter. If you're still alive in the morning, come by and see me. Meantime, I'll be out here all night, me and my gun. You only glance back once as you walk away. McFurter is still there, standing in the middle of her fields, watching you go. The farther you go back into the forest, the darker the sky gets. By the time you finally emerge out onto level ground, the only light you have to see by is that of the moon and stars. It's just enough to illuminate a small, shambling farmhouse in the middle of the clearing. Strange red symbols have been painted over the windows and doors. You can hear the sound of rushing water nearby. The house's windows are dark and the entire clearing is silent. No matter how long you stand still near the house, this doesn't change. You circle the house and peer into all the windows, but it's hard to make out anything substantial in the gloom. At least as far as you can tell, there isn't anything moving inside. You open the front door and a wave of musty air hits you square in the face. It has an acrid edge that sours in the back of your mouth. But nothing else comes out to meet you. No monsters, no men, nothing. So you step inside. Stepping inside is like stepping into a tomb. Nothing here lives or breathes. The farmhouse's front door is entirely covered in a thick layer of dust. Before you can take another step, something catches your attention. Your eyes have slowly been adjusting to the darkness, and now they see clearly enough to spot dark spots in the floor where the dust has been disturbed. The trail leads almost directly to the door at the back of the room. There's been foot traffic here, and recently. You open the back door slowly, leaning as far away from the opening as possible. Sure enough, something barrels out of the house's back room. If you hadn't positioned yourself so prudently, it would have run straight into you. As it is, it stumbles and crashes into a rolling heap on the floor. After the dust settles, you're able to make out the sprawling limbs and tattered clothes of a man. He lies still for one brief moment, blinking owlishly up at you. Then he startles back into movement, scrambling up onto his feet. Nobody, he says quickly. Nobody at all. Who are you? His eyes flick between you and the door, and he remains crouched, like a wounded animal ready to spring. He doesn't seem keen on speaking again. His clothes hang loosely off his thin frame, and his angular face is covered in a patchwork of scars, bruises, and scabs. This is not a man who has had an easy life. The man listens intently, and a frown grows across his face. My name's Robert Baker, he says, once you're done. Sounds like neither of us belongs here. Baker doesn't take your silence well. He twitches, agitated, and hurries to go on the defensive. McFurter sent you, didn't she? Well, you can run back to her stupid farm and tell her I didn't do nothing wrong. I didn't take her, woman, no matter what she thinks. I don't even know where Maggie is. He starts pacing, gesturing sharply in quick, spastic movements. She thinks just 'cause I'm a hobo, I'm some kind of criminal. We got a code, and I ain't never broken it. And I got nothing against those two women neither. It's none of my business. Baker laughs brokenly. 'Cause she doesn't believe the truth. Everyone else here does, but that woman refuses to. I can't say I blame her. I didn't believe it at first either. But after what happened, he clutches anxiously at a hank of his hair. The movement pulls the skin of his forehead taut, opening up a scabbed over cut above his eyebrow. Blood drips down onto his cheek. He stills. The trail of blood continues to make its way down across his face, towards his chin. When he finally swipes at it, the red smears across the entire left side of his face. He glances down at his hand afterwards and laughs again. I got here 2 nights ago. I was just passing through, found this old place before sunset. I decided to spend the night. Biggest mistake I ever made, and that's saying something. He exhaled shakily, eyes wide and bright with remembered terror. I thought the local legends were nonsense, but they're not. That thing, it found me here. I got away, but I must have led it too close to their farm. Next thing I knew, it was morning and I was stumbling into town covered in my own blood. Everyone assumed it was maggots, though. He shivers, trembles, really. He was halfway to falling apart when he stands. That's why they call me Red Jake. Stupid nickname is. My things, Baker mutters, wiping at his face again. It just spreads the mess around. When I ran, I left it out here, and I may have passed out for a while after I came back for it. Running for your life really tires the guy out. He takes a deep breath. After tonight, I'm never setting foot in Ross's Corners again. You can bet on that. For a while, it seems like the conversation might just be over. Baker shifts nervously on his feet, still vibrating with tension. The attic, he blurted suddenly. You should check the attic. Just don't do anything crazy. Please. I'd like to live the night. He gestures to the open door towards the back room. Sure enough, a ladder leads up through a hole in the ceiling. You leave Baker behind in the front room and take the ladder 2 rungs at a time. Maybe hurrying through this fresh nightmare as quickly as possible will make it easier to stomach. You poke your head up into the attic, and the acrid smell that has bothered you when you first entered the house returns tenfold. As you emerge more fully into the cramped attic, you can see why. Parts of the floor are covered in dark slime, and others are just stained dark brown. It's old blood, you realize. 2 wide bloodstains. Meriwether had mentioned the monster killed his 2 friends. Bile rises in the back of your throat. I knew I was going to fail that. The vomit rushes up before you can swallow it back. It's been hours since you ate, and that awful watery bile is the only thing that comes up. Still, your stomach continues to work against you for several minutes, trying to expel material that just isn't there. You lie strung out, exhausted on the floor of the attic, staring at a puddle of your own mess. You take deep, gulping breaths that do little to help. Still, you eventually manage to regain composure, continuing your investigation. Aside from the slime and stains, there's a scattering of papers and a smudged chalk outlined in the center of the floor. You rise to your full height, not easily done beneath this low sloped ceiling, to get a better look at the chalk drawing. About a third of it has been erased, but the rest of it is unmistakable. It's a pentagram, and a rather elaborate one at that. You stand in silence for a moment, struggling to come to grips with the evidence before you. Either this is a very, very elaborate prank, or it's real. Your knees buckle and you sway back against the sloped ceiling. You snatch up the scattered papers. Sure enough, they're each covered in writing, although you have to squint and strain your eyes to read the faded ink in the moonlight. They document a summoning ritual. According to these notes, it required a pentagram, blood rice, and half an hour of continuous chanting. You read them front and back. To your dismay, the notes on how to banish the monster comprise barely a footnote. Nevertheless, the notes are very clear. The circumstances are similar to those needed for the summoning pentagram. Chanting, blood. The chant is reworded version of the original, a short, surprisingly easily to remember phrase that must be repeated over and over. It also says, in large, bolded and underlined words, that if the chanting stops at any point, for any reason, the ritual must be started over from the beginning. There's no way you can do this alone, and you know of only 2 people available within the immediate area. Baker seems like the obvious choice. He started right there, and he believes the monster exists, which is more than you can say for McFurter. However, he's already been traumatized by the thing once. Getting him to help you is going to be a tough sell. Sure enough. You want me to what? He yelps and clasps a hand over his mouth and glances nervously from side to side. You take in the feverish look in Baker's eyes and the high, tense set of his shoulders. This is a man scared half out of his wits. Threats and logic aren't going to be any use here. Kindness, though. You express your sympathy for what Baker's been through, and appeal to his better nature. By banishing these things, you'll be saving countless others. With every word out of your mouth, Baker deflates. By the end, he just looks defeated. Resigned. It's not really that attitude you were hoping for, but you take what you can get. You're about to lead him up to the attic when a noise draws your attention outside. At first, you think it might be a bear, but no. It's the loud rumbling of a car engine, and it's getting closer. It stops just outside. The coach's headlamp shines through the window, too bright to see past. There's a knock at the door. You move to the door and open it just a fraction. Bertram Merriweather stands at the other side, absolutely livid. Under different circumstances, the purple-red color of his face would be pretty funny. As it is, it just makes your stomach sink. Bertrand looks between you and Baker and gives a wordless cry of rage. He pushes past you into the room. Just what exactly is going on here? Bertrand shrieks at you. You're here to loot the place, aren't you? To take whatever else you can wring out of my father. He jabs a finger in your face. No, don't answer. It's clear enough from the company you keep. He glances over his shoulder to the sneer at Baker, then turns his glare back on you. You hold your hands out in a placating gesture. We're not here to take anything, you say. We're just here to take care of things like your father wanted. I don't believe you, Bertram mutters, but he isn't yelling anymore. Who the hell are you? Baker says. Bertram's eyes narrow dangerously. I'm Bertram Merriweather, he sneers, and I hold the deed to the God-forsaken house. He pulls a folded paper from his jacket pocket and brandishes like a weapon. And now you two are going to tell me what exactly is going on here, or so help me, I'll take you both to court. No, Bertrand says. No. Before you can stop him, he grabs one of your ears and yanks. Hard. In space of a blink, you're being frog-marched out to his motor coach. Something crashes in the forest nearby. You freeze mid-step, but Bertrand doesn't, and ultimately the two of you are both end up in a heap on the ground. There's another crash this time. Closer. You scramble to your feet and run for the door. It's not far, just a few feet. A few feet, too many as it turns out. Bertrand tackles you to the ground. You're not going anywhere, he snaps. You glance over your shoulder. There's a dark shape gathering at the edge of the tree line. The following happens in sequence. Slow motion snapshots that you barely have time to register as you fight for your life. You scream at Bertrand to move. Bertrand glances back to follow your line of sight. Bertrand screams. Bertrand climbs off of you and starts to run. Your legs unfold. You sprint for the door. Time speeds up again as you trip across the threshold and slams the door shut behind you. His whole body is shaking violently, but he moves with purpose as he starts piling furniture in front of the door. Bertrand stares at you, breathing heavily. He nods. I'll help, he says. Just show me what to do. You don't waste time explaining what needs to be done. You tell him the essentials only, and while he balks at the blood sacrifice part, you assure him that a mere drop should be enough. He reacts even more violently to the pungent smell in the attic, but his mood shifts when he sees the final piece of evidence that his father's claims were true. Bertrand stares down at the bloodstains and smudged chalk pentagram with the wide, watery eyes. Then he coughs and turns away, blinking rapidly. Baker's eyes the ritual space with visible distaste. "Let's just get this over with," he mutters. Your companions memorize the ritual chant with relative ease, and then you collect the drops of blood. Bertrand's hand shakes as you prick his fingertips, but he endures the pain with grim determination. Baker makes a face, but otherwise takes it well enough. Finally, you redraw the chalk pentagram using a broken piece of chalk. You just have to get the chant over with. With 3 people, there should be no problem keeping the chant going. In hindsight, you may have been a tad too confident. You should have known the monster would try to distract you. The distraction comes in the form of a scream outside. Baker goes deathly still, and all color drains from his face. The scream sounds again, drawn out and tortured, but not real. There's no way it could be real. It's a trap, and you refuse to fall for it. Baker shakes his head like a leaf. He sinks to the floor, clutching at his head. Bertrand is pale and still, staring at the room's one window. For a few long minutes, the only sounds you hear are the muffled screams coming from outside. "We're going to have to start over," Bertrand says. He's still wearing the stupid, imperious expression, but his voice is soft. To your surprise, he gives you a sympathetic look. Baker scowls to the floor. "Let's just get this over with," he repeats. The screaming starts up again midway through your second attempt. A few minutes later, the farmhouse begins to shake in its foundations. Still you chant. Bertrand falters and jabs a finger up towards the ceiling. There's a dark patch gathering at the peak of the ceiling. As you watch, a dark ichor collects in the center and begins to drip down into the center of the pentagram. It evaporates on contact, swirling up in wisps of smoke. As the wisps accumulate, they start to take shape. The smoke billows out and in, swirling in and around itself in an endless pattern. It reminds you of lungs struggling to breathe. Red eyes flick open and closed, increasing slowly number as the cloud grows in size. An awful rotting smell clogs your throat, making it difficult to speak. Bertrand gags, and Baker is screaming. For one paralyzing moment, you're the only one chanting. Bertrand grabs his voice, and you turn your attention to Baker. You can't stop chanting. You can't risk it. Not now. But you can change the pitch of your voice, and so you shift it soft and low. Murmuring a chant like a bedtime story, you reach out and lay a hand on Baker's shoulder. He leans into it with his whole body and falls silent, taking deep, shuddering breaths. When he finally resumes the chant, it's with renewed vigor. His voice is blown out after all his screaming, but is strengthened by conviction. The monster's body twists in abrupt, jerky movements, constricting and expanding in awkward stutters. Its eyes change shape and size, and then suddenly, they all shut at once. And open again, staring directly at you. "Power," a voice calls from somewhere, everywhere, and nowhere, but mostly from inside your head. "Power," it repeats. The word falls like a drumbeat on your ears, calling your heart to beat in time. You take a deep breath and steady yourself, and double down on the chant. The monster shrieks, an awful sound that rattles the skull from the inside. The smell in the attic is so bad you fear you might collapse from it, but you don't. And the monster swirls in tighter and tighter spirals until finally it disappears altogether without a sound. With the monster gone and the ritual done, you, Bertrand, and Baker fall to the floor like puppets with their strings cut. The relief in the small room is palpable, as is the lack of that pungent smell. The air is clear. You breathe it in with huge noisy gulps. Baker and Bertrand are bent up in half-fetal positions, trembling as they stare off into the middle distance. You are much better off. Every joint in your body feels as though it's been liquefied. You move bonelessly, weak and clumsy as a newborn lamb. But you do still manage to clamber to your feet and stay there. You offer your hands to Baker and Bertrand. Bertrand takes it immediately, and after a moment's hesitation, so does Baker. They pull from opposite sides, using the opposing forces to lever themselves upwards until the three of you stand as one. I'm getting the hell out of here, Baker mutters. His voice is quiet and shaky. You can't really blame him for that. You follow him down the ladder, and Bertrand brings up the rear. Baker stops on the first floor, so he makes a circuit of the house with 2 rooms, gathering up all his things. I'm done with Ross's Corners, he says. Done. I'd sooner die than set foot in this godforsaken town again. He marches aside and spits on the front steps, and Bertrand follow at a slower pace. Baker makes a beeline for the trees, still muttering under his breath. He stops just outside the tree line, hesitating. Then he turns back. I hope I never see the 2 of you again, he says, without malice. He nods, just once, with all the gravity in the world, and then he's gone. My father died earlier today, Bertrand says, almost conversationally. When you glance over, his face is empty of everything but weariness. He licks chapped lips and clears his throat. I came here angry, he says. His voice is hoarse after nearly an hour of chanting. I wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't thinking straight at the hospital earlier either. He looks at you with naked vulnerability. Please, forgive me. I know I acted a fool. You didn't deserve that. Bertrand smiles. It's a small, bitter thing, sharp and inward. I suppose I deserve that, he says, and falls silent. You glance away, uncomfortable. You turn to Bertrand and find him staring at the farmhouse. I've no clue what to do with this damn thing, he mutters. God knows I don't want to keep it. Okay. Bertrand's mouth twists sourly. Yes, maybe that would be for the best. He murmurs, just leave it. Let the woods take it back. Let this little town forget it ever existed at all. It's fit for little else. I'll deal with this awful place later, he says suddenly. Right now I'm going to drive back to Arkham. We're planning to fall straight into my bed and go to sleep for a day or 2. He starts walking. You're welcome to hitch a ride. You keep me from falling asleep. There's no way you're passing up the opportunity to leave. You follow Bertrand around the house to his motor coach. The car's barely dented in several places and almost entirely covered in slime. Bertrand rolls his eyes to the sky but climbs in without audible complaint. He does, however, give an exaggerated sigh of relief when the car engine starts. Thought we might have to walk all the way back, he mutters. Bertrand takes the winding, empty roads at such speed that you almost feel for your life. However, after facing down a smoke monster, you are too tired and strung out to feel any further danger in a significant way. The perilous journey home is filled with nothing more than cheap thrills. Bertrand doesn't need you to keep him awake at all. He stares down the road with wide open eyes and he grins viciously when the coach's tires squeal over a tight turn. Bertrand is forced to slow down once you're within the Arkham City limits, but the roads are all deserted at this hour anyway. He pulls up in front of your apartment and eyes the building suspiciously. "This is really where you live?" he mutters. You roll your eyes and go for the door, but Bertrand holds out a hand to stop you. Then he reaches his jacket and pulls out his wallet. Bertrand slaps a thick wad of paper bills into your hands. It's quite a lot, certainly enough to take care of your money troubles, at least for the very immediate future. "I know about your recent expedition," he explains, looking a little abashed as he says it. "I did some digging after your visit. I know you didn't come here for money, but it's the least I can do." Then he gives you a serious look and a business card. "I owe you more. If you ever need a favor, let me know." Bertrand drives away with a shrill shriek of tires. You stare until he's long gone. Then you stumble up into your little apartment. It's so quiet, so still. 2 hours ago, you were fighting for your life, banishing a monster with the aid of 2 near strangers. Now you're home and safe, although the latter is hard to believe. You curl up in bed and stare blankly at the wall, unable to close your eyes for any extended amount of time. Hours later, the first rays of sunlight cast within the wall in pale gold. Birdsong, faint and thin, finally breaks the silence. You close your eyes and sleep. Dr. Loretta Ghali has survived. Alright, well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. I do hope to actually play this with a group someday in the not too distant future. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. If you like this content, leave a comment below. And if you think I did something wrong, be sure to let me know. Thank you. Have a great day.